A cabinet as pressure builds on her, Theresa May shuffles the pack with rivals rumoured to be on manoeuvres. No backsliding on gay rights, a warning to Mrs May from within her own party over partnership with the DUP. Rude and abusive, the criticism of the Prime Minister's top aides as MPs call for them to be replaced. The sun shines on Jeremy Corbyn, but one party critic insists he missed an election open goal. We're ready for the negotiations, a message from Merkel to May over Brexit. Also this lunchtime, why a failed credit card payment stopped the London Bridge terrorists from hiring a truck. And the Lions battling their way to a deserved win in New Zealand. Good afternoon. Theresa May is confirming her cabinet this lunchtime as pressure for her removal builds in the Conservative Party. A survey of party members suggests nearly two-thirds think she should resign, and leadership rivals are rumoured to be on manoeuvres about launching a challenge. So far, Mrs May has made no changes to her existing cabinet lineup, a move in itself being seen as a sign of her weakness following her humiliation. The five most senior members of the Cabinet will stay in their posts. Philip Hammond's job is safe. He remains Chancellor of the Exchequer. Boris Johnson stays on as Foreign Secretary, and Amber Rudd will be tipped as a potential leadership candidate, has been confirmed in her current role as the Home Office. David Davis stays in May's top team as Brexit Secretary, and Michael Fallon keeps his job as Defence Secretary. But there are a number of other big posts we're yet to find out about, like the Department of Health, will Jeremy Hunt stay on as Health Secretary, and Liam Fox as International Trade Secretary, Andrea Leadsom, the Environment Secretary, Liz Truss as the Justice Secretary, and then, of course, Justin Greening as Education Secretary. Well, the uncertainty comes as key party voices, not least the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Ruth Davidson, have expressed concern about the Tory minority government's reliance on the Democratic Unionists for votes in Parliament. Well, Sky's political correspondent Darren McCaffrey is outside Downing Street now, and Darren, it's a bit of a headache here for Theresa May.
It's more than a headache. She is clinging on to power in Downing Street this afternoon, Rebecca, primarily because, as you've rightly pointed out, she is weakened. Her authority is weakened following that result, which did not give her a majority on Thursday. Now, so it is a big task for Theresa May, and I could imagine it's going to be a pretty long weekend inside number 10.
It is indeed. Thanks very much, Darren. Now, Theresa May's campaign has been widely criticised for her election disappointment. The reliance on Mrs May, rather than clear policies, and the belief that the former UKIP voters would come over to the Conservatives, both backfired. Our senior political correspondent Beth Rigby reports now on what went so terribly wrong for the Prime Minister.
You need the right strong and stable government in place.
Strong and stable.
Strong and stable leadership.
This was the campaign the Conservatives meant to run.
Theresa May and the Conservative Party was reduced almost to like a bit player in there. And a lot of activists, a lot of people in the party thought that was the wrong choice, particularly when things started to go wrong.
So Theresa May is weakened just when she should be focusing on preparations for Brexit negotiations with the EU. Those are due to begin in only 9 days' time. And speaking from Mexico, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has urged Theresa May to respect the calendar already set out by the invoking of Article 50.
When Great Britain is ready, we are ready to negotiate. It's not possible.
So how much is Mrs May at fault, and will party members back her or call for her to go? From Westminster, I'm joined now by Laura Perrins, co-editor of The Conservative Woman. And Laura, can Theresa May survive this, and if so, for how long?
I think it's going to be a very difficult fight for her now to survive this. I think the next 24 to 72 hours will prove absolutely crucial. If she can survive the first 72 hours then and get into negotiations and get into those Brexit negotiations, it may be that she has a chance. It will depend on how I think the papers are tomorrow morning, the Sunday papers, and also what happens early next week. But you know, she's obviously digging her heels in, and she wants to go forward with this coalition or this supply and confidence deal with the DUP. So I think it is the next 72 hours that will be crucial for her.
And if she does go, who do you think are the most likely to replace her?
Well, I think the most likely will be either Boris Johnson or David Davis, and of course Amber Rudd is in there too. So they, to me, will be the three main players.
And what do you think went so terribly wrong? Was it Theresa May's personality in her campaign or her policies?
Well, I absolutely think it's probably a combination of both. I mean, you know, when you're looking back and you're carrying out a post-mortem on what exactly went wrong with this disastrous campaign, you know, everybody does have an agenda. So people on the left of the party will say, well, this is because they've moved too far to the right. People on the right of the party say, well, this is because of previous, you know, very liberal stances, or they haven't been tough enough on Brexit. So you always have to think about that, is what is the underlying agenda? I mean, to me, it looked like the campaign was going very well until she dropped that dementia tax bombshell in the manifesto. Now, I think there is some argument in principle for her actual proposal, in that we shouldn't burden very ordinary working class families with a huge tax bill to pay for the care of, you know, perhaps very wealthy individuals, and indeed to protect their inheritance. So that is an argument that you could have, but it's an argument you have to have sort of a year or 6 months before you are going to propose such a drastic policy like that at the end of the day is going to hit your core voters. It is absolutely not something you can drop in the middle of a campaign, in the middle of a manifesto, without having tested it either within your party or indeed your core vote whatsoever. I mean, that to me, was the absolute killer. That's when things really started to go wrong. And then when she U-turned on it a few days later, well, then her whole strong and stable headline could no longer stand up.
And this DUP partnership, it's dangerous for her, isn't it? Because they are a controversial party with pretty traditional views.
Well, I mean, it is interesting to see how prejudiced people can be when what's called, you know, the God Squad are on the side. At the end of the day, the issues that seem to be causing an absolute media meltdown at the DUP are devolved issues to Northern Ireland, and I believe that that's where they should stay. But the much more serious issue with this potential coalition at the DUP is the peace process in Northern Ireland. You know, the British government have said that they will remain neutral, that they would always remain neutral between the two sides, and now obviously they're very compromised in relation to that stance, and there's a huge, you know, the power sharing has been suspended in Northern Ireland at the moment. So to me, peace is a lot more important than politics. So it puts her in it puts her in a very difficult position.
OK, Laura Perrins, thanks very much for your time. Now it's been revealed that the London Bridge terrorists tried to hire a 7.5-ton lorry just hours before they launched their attack, but they were only stopped because their card payment was declined. Borough Market, where the attackers killed 5 people before they were shot, is still closed off a week on. Detectives have also released pictures of the knives they used in the attack. Well, Sky's crime correspondent Martin Brunt has this report.
The terrorists used matching kitchen knives 12 inches long to kill and injure most of their victims. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Scotland Yard.
This is Sky News coming up. We'll be asking how exactly will Theresa May make a hung parliament work?
Press the red button. Sky. Believe in better.
This is Sky News. Let's find out what's happening on the sport.
On the way at 2:15 after midweek defeat, victory for the Lions this 2.
Much for that. Now, a few people predicted a hung parliament, and now there are lots of questions, both within and outside government, about how a minority Conservative government will actually work. The parties may not have prepared for this result, but civil servants are expected to look at all possible options and outcomes, and they'll be playing a key role as negotiations take place this weekend. Well, Alan Evans is Chief Executive at the British Academy, but previously held a number of senior positions in the civil service, including Principal Private Secretary to 3 Secretaries of State and Head of Strategic Communications at 10 Downing Street, where he joins me now from Westminster. And Mr. Evans, how exactly would a partnership with the DUP work?
Well, the civil service got long experience of dealing with coalitions, obviously from 2010 onwards. But there's nothing really been like this where the DUP is a new unknown quantity, because it's not a formal coalition that's on the offing like there was between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. So it would be very much about negotiating about what will the issues that they're interested in and how one can put it together into something that will make for a half-decent Queen's speech, which they've got put before the House of Commons in a few weeks' time, a few days' time. That's not going to be an easy negotiation to have.
So what exactly will the DUP be wanting from Theresa May?
Well, I think we'll have to see what they come up with. But one thing that they're clearly going to be asking about is greater benefits for Northern Ireland. And if one takes an obvious example that's going to be on the Prime Minister's plate at the moment, is how on earth to handle the Brexit negotiations that are due to start later this month. And one of the things that the DUP have been clear about is they want a more flexible relationship with the Republic of Ireland. Now, that seems to me to imply that whereas we thought we knew where we were going on Brexit, all bets are off, especially on Brexit in the coming days.
Now, Theresa May didn't get a majority. How is that likely to affect her in negotiating a good Brexit deal for the country?
Well, I think the irony of the outcome of the election, and the civil service will have to work within this, in that they would have prepared for all three possible outcomes: a majority government led by Theresa May, some type of progressive alliance led by Jeremy Corbyn, and a hung parliament. But as I said, the irony is that running into it, the Prime Minister and her aides said that she wanted to have greater certainty, greater stability and flexibility to negotiate. She now ends up with the worst of all worlds, in that she could be beholden not only to the DUP but to any backbench Conservative MP who doesn't particularly like what's being proposed. So it makes her negotiating hands even tougher than it would have been anyway.
And can she survive this, or is it better for the country if someone else takes over?
Well, I think, as your previous correspondent said, it's going to be critical what happens over the next 3 days. And I think she's got three big challenges. The first one is to see whether or not there are elements of a policy deal that can be put together with both her party and the DUP that will provide enough stability to get passed through a Queen's speech in Parliament. Secondly, what on earth is the negotiating strategy for Brexit going to be? Because if the DUP are strongly involved, they might want the Irish question brought up front, whereas previously that would have been pressed off to perhaps the later parts of the negotiations. But thirdly, and you've picked this up on Sky News a lot today, the style of government, and how is she going to involve more ministers in her negotiations, because she is seriously weakened by the outcome of the election, and there are obviously a lot of questions being asked about the role to be played by her two chiefs of staff, Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill. I think their position will look very different in a few days' time.
There's certainly a lot of pressure on them. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Evans, for joining us at this lunchtime.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a look at the weather now, shall we?
Ensuring brighter days ahead. Blue Insurance Home Insurance. Proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
It's windy with a dying rain band moving across Wales, Scotland and northern and western England. Showers are following to the north and the west. It's mainly mild warm in the sunny southeast, but heavy rain over parts of eastern Scotland, northern England and Wales will slowly clear into the Midlands and southeast England this afternoon, turning increasingly light and patchy later on. Western Scotland will see patchy rain for a time too. That will give way to sunshine and a scattering of showers later. Elsewhere, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see sunny spells and a few showers, whilst the southeast will be dry and sunny. But southeast England will see a little patchy rain moving in overnight as the Midlands dry up, while Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland will keep a scattering of showers. Northern and western England and Wales will be dry. It'll stay quite mild. Sunday, it'll bring sunny spells and widespread blustery showers, some heavy and thundery, but the southeast will be mainly dry after a damp start.
Blue Insurance Home Insurance. Proud sponsors of Sky News Weather.
This is Sky News. Coming up, was Labour's success a win for Jeremy Corbyn?
Back to Ferrari. Join us for qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix, live only on Sky Sports F1 today from 5.
You're watching Sky News. The top stories. Theresa May is confirming her cabinet this lunchtime as pressure for her to resign intensifies following a survey of party members suggesting nearly 2/3 think she should go. Some Conservatives have expressed concern about a Tory minority government's reliance on the Democratic Unionists for votes in Parliament. And Mrs May's special advisers are in the firing line as MPs call for them to be replaced. Now, I think we've got some pictures that we can bring you now of Michael Gove. He's been out on a run this lunchtime, heading home. There he is. He's got the photographers and the cameramen taking shots of him. There's wide speculation that he may get one of those positions in Theresa May's cabinet. We are expecting the reshuffle to be announced this lunchtime. Stay tuned here on Sky News. We'll have the very latest there as he heads into his house. Now, Jeremy Corbyn surpassed all expectations on Thursday night after campaigning on Labour's most left-wing manifesto since 1982. He was seen shaking hands with supporters today as he left his Islington home. But was this really a win for the Labour leader, and will the party finally unite around him? Well, speaking yesterday, Corbyn was defiant about the party's success.
Incredible result for the Labour Party because people voted for hope. Young people and old people all came together yesterday. Very high turnout, huge increase in the Labour vote, and they did it because they want to see things done differently and they want hope in their lives. We put on more than 3 million votes yesterday. We gained seats in every region of the country. We won 3 million more votes on a much higher turnout. I think that is a pretty good result.
Well, joining me now to discuss what the Labour leader does next are Shihab Khan, columnist for The Independent, and Tom Slater, deputy editor of Spite. And starting with you, Shihab, many are asking, could Jeremy Corbyn still be Prime Minister?
I think it will be highly unlikely that we'll see Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister in the next few months or so. What we do definitely think, and it's more than likely, is that in 2022, if that's when we'll have the next general election, which I know, given the state of British politics, is a bit of an assumption, that Labour's in a fantastic position to go on and win a majority. Looking at 2015, which was undoubtedly a catastrophe for Labour, there were very few marginals left for Labour to contest. What we've seen now is in a number of places, including Ian Duncan Smith's seat in Chingford, is that there's been a surge, and places that weren't marginals before are now marginals. And it puts Labour in a fantastic position to now push on and in the next general election push for that majority.
Well, indeed, Kensington, the last result to be announced, nobody would have thought that that would turn red. But bringing you in, Tom, now, what was the difference between the two campaigns? How did Theresa May get it so wrong and Jeremy Corbyn so right?
Well, I think that's the point about Jeremy Corbyn's campaign. You do have to give it up to him in some respects insofar as pulling this out completely against the odds. And I think what this vote showed more than anything else is that the British public don't like to be taken for granted and they don't like to be patronised. And I think that the Tory campaign had both of those things in spades. That being said, I would certainly temper some of the enthusiasm about Corbyn's surge insofar as I always think of that quote, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And I think that it's quite clear that compared to the competition, it's very clear that he had a semblance of substance and conviction, but it certainly wasn't enough to cause a kind of upset I think some people were hoping for. And I think the reason for that is whilst it's certainly true that Corbyn has energised a lot of people in the urban centres, a lot of young people have been drawn towards him, it hasn't really made up for the historical lack and historical problem with the Labour Party is that it's losing touch with its working class support. And in many ways the fact that the source of the dynamism was again amongst the kind of metropolitan bourgeoisie in general speaks to the fact that it's no closer to actually bridging that gap. So I think to hail this, which let's not forget was a loss, not a win, as some sort of revolt of the many against the few is overcooking it somewhat.
OK, Shihab, bringing you in now. Theresa May said yesterday that we need certainty, but it seems at the moment there's anything but. How is this going to impact people in terms of the economy and, you know, everyday life?
The government that we've got at the moment, this minority government which is going to be propped up by the DUP, is going to be far from stable. What we see now is Theresa May going into these Brexit negotiations with an incredibly weak hand, and it's going to have a knock-on effect on a number of aspects of society. People are likely to see, as Theresa May has said herself, that the majority that she had in before the election wasn't strong enough for her to carry on with these negotiations. What Jeremy Corbyn has to do and what the Labour Party has to do is sort of be a more inclusive party. We saw a number of big figures come come out after the election and say they were wrong about Jeremy Corbyn, the likes of Yvette Cooper, the likes of Chuka Umunna, if they can come back in and if we can have an inclusive party with them on the front benches, Labour has a fantastic position to push on and really hold Theresa May to account, which is what we need going into these Brexit negotiations.
But people still say that they don't see Jeremy Corbyn as a leader.
I think that's been completely rebuked by the fact that we've just seen such a surge in Labour votes. The voter percentage has gone up by 10%. The share of the vote has gone up by 10%. That's huge. Anyone who claims that Jeremy Corbyn isn't a potential leader just has to look at what we've witnessed over the last 8 or 9 weeks. When the election was called, he was 20 points behind in the polls. His performances in the TV debates, the way he's engaged with people, the way the party has got behind him is a clear indication that he has the ability to not only pull the party together, but to be a leader for this country.
And Tom, do you think we could now see Theresa May adopting a softer stance on Brexit, perhaps remaining as part of the single market?
Well, I think that's the massive danger in relation to this, is that particularly in the in the humbling of Theresa May at this election and the surge of Jeremy Corbyn, what a lot of people in the media elite, within the Labour Party, within the Tory Party, even people within the European Commission are saying, is that they're kind of willfully misreading this vote, to my mind, to try and use it as an excuse to soften Brexit, to frustrate it on some level, to dilute it. And I think that's the big danger, actually, in relation to Jeremy Corbyn's rise. And I think what's kind of happened is, in some respects, it hasn't been an anti-establishment backlash. He's become a kind of tool of the establishment, an attempt of people to say that his success reflects the fact that the voters actually want a softer Brexit. And that's a particular danger for Jeremy Corbyn, because his party still does straddle urbanite Remainers who are very upset about Brexit, and a lot of people throughout the country who voted Brexit want it to be seen through. And my worry is that, considering the fact that Jeremy Corbyn was a Eurosceptic for most of his life and then dropped his principles at the one moment it mattered, I think he's actually pretty likely to listen to those more moderating voices, to not listen to the public at large, and in the process actually to betray that huge democratic mandate which Brexit represents. And I think that's the real danger here.
So what does Theresa May do from here then, if you're advising her? Does she fire those aides who helped on her campaign trail? What's her next move?
Well, I think in relation to Theresa May, I think her fundamental mistake, and this is a mistake of herself and her advisers, was to confuse the dynamism and the enthusiasm for Brexit with dynamism and enthusiasm of herself. And that's one of the things that she completely failed to meet. And that's why Brexit during the campaign completely fell off the table, and why she just basically treated the electorate to a series of uninspiring, pretty downbeat policies and horrendous patronising sound bites. It's not entirely clear how she's going to claw back any authority in this example, but I think what this really shows is really the job now is back to the public to really put pressure not only on the government but on their own representatives to make sure that Brexit is seen through however these negotiations are carried out, because if nothing else, Theresa May has proven herself to be a far from perfect vessel for carrying through Brexit and for upholding what people want.
And are we going to see an early election?
Personally, I think it's quite likely that we will. This minority government that Theresa May is going to be leading up isn't going to be particularly strong. We need a strong majority going into these Brexit negotiations. That's why Theresa May called the election. She said herself that if she loses 6 seats, she won't be able to negotiate with Europe. What we need more than anything else is, to quote Theresa May, a strong and stable government, and that's not what we've got at the moment. What Labour have to do is hold the government to account, do everything they can to unify, ensure that Theresa May is made accountable for absolutely everything that she does. In terms of whether or not she'll continue to push this hard Brexit, we saw from her speech after the election that it appears as though that she thinks she's still in a position to do that. I don't think she is. I think this was a clear rejection of the path that she's wanting to take. And what we need now is another election in, I think, 6 months or so, to ensure that we have a strong government to ensure that these negotiations go well.
And Tom, finally with you then, this partnership, if you like, with the DUP, they've got controversial views on same-sex marriage, on abortion. How difficult will it be for Theresa May to create this union?
I think it's going to be incredibly difficult, and I think it's even on the case of putting aside all of their incredibly reactionary views, is the fact that they're actually a lot softer on Brexit than either Theresa May or actually I think the electorate are. But just finally on this point of hard Brexit, the only thing I would say to Jeremy Corbyn and Labour supporters is to recognise that hard Brexit is actually within their own interests as much as it is for all the people who voted for it. The profound paradox at the heart of Corbyn's Labour at the moment is that they're pushing for a soft Brexit, despite the fact a lot of the policies they want to pursue would be impossible under a soft Brexit. So I think the one thing that needs to be at the heart of the Labour's minds at the moment, as they've taken on this new significance, is to remember that thing about returning sovereignty, returning democracy to the UK is about us all being able to make those political choices. Labour would actually be hamstrung by these things, and the fact that they're trying to ignore that just to hold on to their position and satisfy elite Remainers is, to me, pretty farcical.
OK, it's certainly a debate that's going to run on run. Shihab Khan, Tom Slater, thanks very much for your time. Now, when she launched the Tory manifesto, Theresa May needed West Yorkshire. She headed there in the hope that she would turn the constituency of Halifax blue. But it backfired, with Labour increasing its majority there by more than 5,000 votes. So why exactly did the Prime Minister fail to connect with voters? Well, Sky's Gerard Tubb went to find out.
Halifax, in the north of England, 3 long weeks ago. The first place. If life is no better, the slogan strong and stable rings hollow. Gerard Tubb, Sky News, Halifax.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up in the sport, can England...
Broadband and TV sale is now on. Switch now. Only €25 a month for the first 6 months. Don't miss out.
Well, let's take a look at the sport.
Sky News Sports Bulletins, brought to you by Vitality, for your health and life insurance.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon. Action from the Lions Tour and the Champions Trophy in just a moment. But heading through to the semi-finals himself, then the Australians will be out of cricket's Champions Trophy. There's much more for you over on Sky Sports News HQ, and we are back in the next hour.
Brought to you by Vitality, for your health and life insurance.
Well, let's take a look at the weather now.
As a cool evening settles over India, the lights shine bright on a crisp New York night.
It's windy with a dying rain band moving across Wales, Scotland and northern and western England. Showers are following to the north and the west. It's mainly mild warm in the sunny southeast. Heavy rain over parts of eastern Scotland, northern England and Wales will slowly clear into the Midlands and southwest England this afternoon, turning increasingly light and patchy. Western Scotland will see patchy rain. Few showers, while the southeast will be dry and sunny. Southeast England will see a little patchy rain moving in overnight as the Midlands dry up, while Scotland, Northern Ireland and Ireland will keep a scattering of showers. Northern and western England and Wales will be dry. It'll stay pretty mild. Sunday will bring sunny spells and widespread blustery showers, some heavy and thundery, but the southeast will be mainly dry after a damp start.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
This is Sky News. Coming up, we'll have the very latest on the fallout from the general election as the Prime Minister reshuffles her cabinet and faces calls to resign. We'll also ask, has Theresa May's hand been weakened in the Brexit negotiations? We've got all that and plenty more coming up after this short break.